Basie was an American jazz pianist, organist, band leader, and composer, and his first name was William Basie. He grew up in New Jersey. He excelled at school. He learnt drums and piano, but at one point decided to abandon drums and just focus on piano. At the age of 16, I think, in 1920, he moved to Harlem and got involved in the jazz scene there. In 1929, he moved to Kansas City and joined Benny Moten's band. I have to say, I'm really definitely only giving you highlights here. There's a lot more on the Wikipedia page about his life and his work. The band that became the backbone of the Count Basie's standard band came out of the Moten band that he joined in Kansas City. After, according to Wikipedia, Moten had been voted out of the band. Kind of curious as to what went on at that point. In 1936, they were known as Count Basie and his Barons of Rhythm, and then moved to Chicago briefly, and then the following year they moved to New York with the band. And over the next few years, he developed the idea of a big band that incorporated improvisation elements, so in some ways bridging the gap between the kind of standard jazz configurations of, trios, quartets, quintets, and the bigger bands, and this was achieved by basically having some stuff that was arranged and written, and then some stuff that wasn't, kind of in the in-between bits. After the war, he thought that big bands were dead, so he went back to small combos for a while, but as he built in popularity by the 50s, he was back into the big band thing. He's considered to be a key figure in jazz. He has, of course, done many recordings, and he died in 1984. Hi, my name's Dan. So this is a live album by Count Basie and a big band, recorded at Newport Jazz Festival in 1957 and released in 1957, which I conceptually in my head around there, 1956, 57, was about the birth of albums when the LP started to become popular and used a lot for releases. So I know of Count Basie. This is probably my first listen to this album. I'm not 100% sure on that. One of the reasons for that is because everybody in the jazz and slightly other worlds seem to have released a live at Newport or an at Newport album. It was probably still is a high-profile jazz festival. What can I do to describe it? So it's a big band with a large number of brass involved, obviously a rhythm section and Count Basie on the piano. There's a compere who was actually quite a fairly high-profile presenter who was doing basically introductions to all the songs and to all the people that are involved. Which is kind of interesting, but once you know it, I kind of feel like listening to this album over and over again. I wouldn't want to hear these introductions every time. And it is a blend of kind of scripted big band stuff and soloing. There are some songs, but they're kind of mostly later on in the album. So actually, I'm going to have to confess here that there's something has gone slightly awry in my listening. So normally, I try and make sure that I listen to whatever the original release is. And in this case, I listen to a CD version which has got extra tracks in it. I tend to avoid that. I didn't realise I'd done that until after I'd done 2 listens. And actually, kind of on retrospect, I felt like I was glad I listened to this because my favourite tracks were the bonus tracks on here, which are mostly the songs. So overall, this reminded me a lot of a considerably later performer by the name of Jools Holland. So I don't know if you've heard of Jools Holland. In fact, I don't know how well known he is outside the UK. Most people who know anything about music at all in the UK will have heard of Jools Holland because he's been quite high profile in that he's presented TV shows for music in the UK. He was a member of the rock is not the right word, but the band Squeeze in the late 70s. And he hosted on the Tube, and he hosted Jools Holland's, I can't remember, his Hootenanny and various other things. And I've been to see him live several times, and he has a band set up that is very like this. which is him on a piano and a rhythm section and loads of brass. And they do music that's very like this. And in fact, he does a few of these Count Basie tracks that are on this album. So it was very kind of familiar jazz ground for me in that sense. I enjoyed it. It's a good album of live jazz. I feel like jazz is more at home when it's live than when it's studio recorded. To be honest, studio recordings of most jazz are really live, just without an audience anyway. It's very accessible in terms of jazz. It's not difficult listening jazz like some of the albums that we've come across. So it had a good appeal for me. I enjoyed this. What do you think? Please don't be shy. Talk to me in the comments box. That's it from me for now.
Well, all right. Well, okay. Well, you win. I'm in love with you. Well, all right. Okay. Well, you win. Oh, baby, what can I do? I'll do anything you say. And it's just got to be that way.